The next one is on personification. So I just wanted to start with a simple definition. And I've said it's a special kind of metaphor. So if we look at the big category of metaphor, then under that, you need to know, let me just do something else. Let me ignore that. You need to know simile and personification, and obviously metaphor itself. I'm going to bring this down here. It's still under the big category of metaphor. And I think you should also know symbol. There is also metonymy, but let's leave it out for the moment. So personification is a special kind of metaphor. The writer talks about something, now this is critical, that is not alive, as if it were a person. So if you are comparing, let's say, if you said the pen speaks, the pen is not actually a person, people speak, so I am personifying the pen. But if I said the pen roars, if you think of people as roaring, then you've got personification. But if you say, I'm thinking of a lion, then you've got metaphor. So you need to say, is it a person? That's what's critical. Right. Now, what kind of questions do you get? This is what you get. How do you tackle this? If something is effective, it is doing whatever it was that you needed it to do. So you need to look at the personification and say, what is the personification meant to be doing? And then, is it doing whatever it's meant to be doing? So sometimes you could get, analyze the effectiveness of the personification in creating mood, or in revealing something about the character. Excuse me. So something like that. So you say to yourself, what is it meant to be doing? Right. So I didn't know, the person who asked didn't tell me which texts you're studying. So if you ask about something like simile, metaphor, personification, and then you say to me, please could you give examples? I'm only too happy, but please put in brackets, I'm studying Macbeth, or put in, just say from Macbeth, or from Imagined World, so I know which text you want me to look from. So I started with this poem, which is Everything Has Changed Except Graves, the Mzimahola. What is personified? You had a chance to look at it? Okay, so I like to draw. So let's imagine that this is our Dutch Reformed Church. I'm going to put a cross on it. It's embraced by a mute little cemetery. So what is a cemetery? Cemetery is a graveyard. So around this, my graves are too dark. Let me see if I can find a lighter grave. Okay, they don't look very dark, but still. So here are my graves around the church. Okay, these are meant to be gravestones. Now the cemetery is said to embrace the church. So how do you embrace? You put your arms around, and you should be able to get them all the way around. So you are embracing somebody. So what we see is that the cemetery surrounds the church. So Mhola could simply have said the cemetery surrounds the church. But what does he get by embraced by? There's a sense of closeness if you embrace somebody. You are close to that person. You are connected to that person. So what is he suggesting? He's suggesting that the graves are close to the church, are connected to the church, and there seems to be some kind of attachment. So these are the people in the community, in the Dutch Reformed community, now the Methodist community, who have died and been buried close to their church. Mute just means silent, not saying anything. Now, if we read the poem as a whole, okay, if you get what's the effectiveness? So you could simply say he is suggesting this close connection between the graves and the church. Fair enough. But what else is it doing? There is a sense of separation in this community, that the white community has deliberately separated themselves from the black community. And so we get a sense of the graves not wanting to go too far away from the church. But there's something also rather, for me, disturbing about this connection. It's almost as well as if the graves embracing the church, we are separate. Our church, our people, whether they're alive in the church or dead in the graveyard. And so you get this sense of separation, which I think is important to the poem. Let's look at another example. Right, here I've jumped to a very long example from A Hard Frost by C.D. Lewis. So let's just see if we can work out this. He says, mockery spring to lend this bridal gear, clothing. So the clothes of the bride, lent for a few hours to a raw country maid. So let's see the situation in our mind. We have a country girl. Here she is. She's raw. Here, I just think it sort of means rough and inexperienced, and she's not sophisticated the way that an urban girl might have this gloss of sophistication. She's a raw country girl. And what has happened is somebody has lent her bridal clothes. Let's see if I can find that lighter one, okay? So this person has lent her bridal clothes. Lovely. Color? It would be white. So this person has lent her bridal clothes for a few hours. So after a few hours, whoever this person is, and it's all personified, right? This person comes back to her and says, "Give me the clothes back." Oh. Then leaves her all disconsolate, disappointed, with old fairings, old clothes of aconite and snowdrop. So let's just get our picture in our mind. Two things are happening. There's a person who comes along and says to this raw country girl, "Here's a bridal dress for you." I should have suppose I've given her a little veil, okay? Oh, I wanted that lighter color. There we go. So she's got the bridal clothes, and then after a few hours, this person says, "Well, give them back." And she goes back to her old clothes that she had before. Are we okay? Can we see that picture? Now, who has lent this bridal gear? The person who's lent it is called Mockery Spring. Okay. And who has it been lent to? A raw country maid. So this is just the countryside. So we have two personifications going on here. So this Mockery Spring is personified as a person who gives the bridal clothes to the countryside that is personified as a raw country maid. Are we okay? All right. So what is the poem about? It's about frost. Frost, ice. So the man wakes up in the morning, looks out of the window, and the whole countryside is covered in white. It's stunning. It's beautiful. It's white. But then what happens after a few hours? The sun comes up and the frost melts and it's winter. So what's left? You know, the grass looks browny yellow, and the trees sort of look brown or gray, and most of them have just got branches. There are no leaves. And if you had a hedge, the hedge would be kind of all branches and twigs and be all brown and sticky out and stiff, and there wouldn't be a lot of pleasant stuff on it. That's what's happened. So there's your personification, is that the mockery spring, the frost, has made the landscape beautiful, stunning. But it's going to disappear after a few hours, and the brown, wintry landscape is going to emerge. So there is our first personification. So then he says, but there is a real transformation happening. Let me just see if I can, I can't get back here. No. No. I cannot get back to my things. You're just going to have to take it on trust. That he says that there is a real transformation going on. Oh, let me get a pen. Right. The real transformation is going on under the earth. So up here, you've got all the frost. Down here, you've got the earth. And I'm drawing sort of clods. Clods are earth in those kind of shapes, bits of earth that hang together. So he says the clods of earth are under there, and the seeds are in amongst the clods of the earth. Now, when the frost happens, the water, let's find a blue, the water comes in between, or the water is in the earth. Then the frost comes, and that water swells. So it expands as it becomes ice. So he says that the frost worries the clods because it's expanding into the clods. But when spring comes, this water will come back, and the clods are going to be forced to release their grip. They will release the grip on the clods, and then the seeds, let me go back to my green, will be able, will be able to come up above the earth. All right, so we've got another personification. We've got the earth gripping the seeds. The water gets in, the frost swells and moves the clods and pushes them around. And then when it all melts, there's space, and the little seeds can unravel and come up through the earth. So we've got another personification. We've got the clutch of the earth on the seed that needs to release its clutch so that the seed can come out. So the hard frost, the poem, is about transformation. So we've got the idea of visually, the landscape is transformed by the frost, this white, beautiful, like a girl in her wedding gown. But that is an unreal, it's a mockery spring. It's an unreal spring. It's fake news. The real transformation is happening underground. Okay. Right, so, sorry, everything seems to be, oh, well, now I've got this back, which is lovely. Can we just read it again, please? Mockery spring, to lend this bridal gear for a few hours to a raw country maid, then leave her all disconsolate with old fairings of aconite and snowdrop. No, not here, amid this flounce and filigree of death. So the flounce and filigree is this bride with all her beautiful clothes. The flounces are all the material, and the filigree is the beautiful, delicate, like the lace work, is the real transformation scene in progress. But deep below, where frost, worrying the stiff clods, unclenches their grip, there's your personification on the seeds, and lets our future breathe. Right, now there was one more that I wanted to do that seems to have vanished here. This comes also from a foul poem, which is a Shakespeare. And in this Shakespearean sonnet, Shakespeare describes the eye of heaven. And we're told that the eye of heaven can shine too strongly. So let's just start with the eye of heaven. Now, if you're going to see this eye of heaven as the eye of an animal, then you will call it metaphor. But if you are seeing this eye as the eye of a person, you will call it personification. Now, to answer the kind of question that you get, you would say, in this personification, comma, and then you would explain that personification. You would say, the eye of heaven is the sun. Or you could turn it around and say, the sun is described as the eye of heaven. Then remember what you get. You get what is the effectiveness of this. Why is it effective to call the sun the eye of heaven? Now you look for what the eye and the sun have in common. Obviously, the idea of light. The sun provides light for the earth, an eye allows light into the body. Why would he personify the eye of heaven? To give it a sense of intimacy, familiarity, to make the sun a familiar figure that we would be able to relate to. But we're told that that eye of heaven shines too brightly. So we have the idea of the brightness. The eye of heaven also looks down on us as if it were the eye of somebody in the sky, looks down from the heavens on us. And in looking down, if it is too bright, it will be too hot. Sometimes too hot, the eye, that's meant to be an O, the eye of heaven shines. So we've got the sun, but it's too hot. This familiar figure makes us feel uncomfortable because of the heat in summer. Then the personification is sustained. You can get a sustained metaphor or a sustained personification. That's meant to be an A. When it's sustained, it is kept going over a number of lines. So Shakespeare goes on, and sometimes is his gold complexion dimmed. So the personification is continued, and this is why it would be seen as personification, as the eye of a person, because of the word complexion. So if we think about a person, there is our person, there is his eye, his complexion is his skin color. I think especially of the cheek for the skin color rather than the forehead. So the sun has a gold complexion. So the color of the sun is emphasized in this personification. And gold suggests both beauty and heat, because it's a hot gold color. It's not a pale yellow. So beauty and heat. But we're told that his gold complexion can be dimmed. So now you need to go back to thinking about the sky. What can I know this is going to be quite dark, but I want my black first. Let me then use, I'll use the blue inside it, but I want you to see the dark clouds. So what can dim the gold complexion of the sun? It can be dimmed by clouds. So our personification started with sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. So what dims the gold complexion of the sun? It's clouds. And now you relate this to what the poem is about. And so we go to, the poem is a person who is the writer looking at another person and saying, I want to find a suitable metaphor or simile, if you like, for this person. So this is the writer who is the speaker, but he's also a writer because he's a poet. And he is asking what metaphor would be suitable to discuss this other person. And he suggests that the metaphor should be the metaphor of a summer's day. So our poem then looks at what are the disadvantages of summer. So we can see the advantages. We've got a lovely sun that is warm, sunny days, it's lovely, it's delightful. But he says, there are problems with this metaphor. And the metaphor has become a personification. And what is the problem with this metaphor? Because the eye of heaven, a summer's day, can be too hot, and a summer's day can be cloudy. So our personification is showing us the disadvantages of summer. The eye of heaven, too hot, and then the clouds coming over the sun and hiding the sun, and so making it dark and unpleasant. So go back to the question. The question was, what is personification? And very often students see the metaphor, but they think the metaphor is personification. So one from Macbeth, for example, is when he talks about the milk of human kindness. So if we just put that one here. Because my students see the word human, they say that is personification, but it's not. If you look at that carefully, what are we talking about? We're talking about kindness. And we are comparing kindness to milk. Is milk a person? No. Therefore, this is a metaphor. If we go back to this Shakespeare one, eye and complexion. Do people have an eye and complexion? Yes, they do. So that's personification. So the first thing to do when you're faced with a figure of speech is say, well, what is being described? Because remember, we use a figure of speech to make something which we don't know accessible so that people can understand it by referring to something that we do know. Right? So if we take the human kindness and milk, I'm thinking of human kindness, but you don't know what I'm thinking about. But if I said milk, you go, okay, you are describing kindness as milk. Yes, why? Well, first of all, milk nourishes. Milk is in some way, we think of it as pure, as good, as useful, beneficial. as part of life, because we think of feeding babies on milk. So what are we saying about kindness? That kindness is what adds to life. It makes life better the way that milk makes life better. It nourishes, it's good for one, it's beneficial, it's kindly. Right, so kindness is essential to life in the way that milk is like essential to babies of mammals. So that's a metaphor. It's not a person. Milk isn't a person. But when I say the eye of heaven looks down on us and is hot, or the complexion is covered by clouds, then I have a personification. So it's really important with simile, with metaphor, with personification. They're very similar in that they come under that big category, which we drew much earlier as the big category of metaphor. So we said they come under that category. They belong in that category. But you must distinguish which one it is. So personification is a special kind of metaphor. The writer talks about something that is not alive, as if it were a person. So milk is not alive. Sun is not alive. But is the milk being compared to a person, or is the milk being compared, is the kindness being compared to a person, or is kindness being compared to something else like milk? So is it a metaphor, a kind of normal metaphor, or is it a special kind of metaphor, which is personification? And then when you answer it, you're asking, why is it being used? Why is it effective? And you always say effective in order to do what? In order to achieve what? And it's the same thing if you get, what is the effectiveness of repetition? What is the effectiveness of the punctuation mark? What is the effectiveness of the short sentences? Whatever you get that talks about effectiveness, you're saying if something is effective, it is doing its job. So what is its job?